I've been married to Sarah for 6 years, and there was a time when I thought I had it all figured out. We met in college, hit it off immediately, and after a whirlwind romance, we tied the knot. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but I believed we were solid. Lately, however, things have felt off. It started about 6 months ago when Sarah began acting distant. Little things began to change. She'd come home late from work, seemed preoccupied when we talked, and her phone became practically glued to her hand. I brushed it off at first. Maybe she was just busy with work or had new friends. But then I noticed she was getting dressed up more often, even when we had no plans. The other day, she wore this new red dress that hugged her curves perfectly, and it just didn't feel like it was for me. When I complimented her, she brushed it off, saying she just felt like looking nice. I smiled, but something inside me twisted. I had a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, a voice whispering that something was wrong. I tried to dismiss it because I loved her, but the doubt lingered. As weeks passed, the changes intensified. She started going out more, making excuses about girls' nights and work outings. I had no reason to doubt her, but I couldn't shake the intuition that something was off. One day, I decided to take a leap of faith and surprise her at the restaurant where she said she was going with the girls. When I entered, my heart sank. Instead of a table full of women, I saw her sitting across from my childhood crush, Emily. The sight of them laughing, leaning in too close for comfort, set off a storm of emotions in me. I stood frozen for a moment watching them. Emily had always been someone I admired for her beauty and charm, and there I was, watching my wife look so enthralled with her. I felt anger bubbling up, but more than anything, I felt lost. Was this what Sarah had been hiding? I slipped out before she could see me, my mind racing as I processed what I had just witnessed. That night, I confronted her. I had to know the truth. When I asked her about the dinner, her face went pale and I could see her gears turning. She played it off at first, saying it was just a friendly meetup, but her eyes betrayed her. I pressed on, and eventually the truth came spilling out in a rush. She confessed to having connected with Emily, but insisted it was just an emotional affair, that nothing physical had happened. Her words felt like knives twisting in my gut. I could hardly breathe as I listened to her excuses. She claimed she was unhappy and that I had been neglecting her for months. Her words felt like a betrayal in themselves. I had been there for her, yet she was lying to me about something so significant. The realization hit me hard. This woman, who I trusted with my whole heart, had been playing me for a fool. I felt like I was losing my mind. My emotions swung like a pendulum: anger, sadness, disbelief. I wanted to scream, to cry, to hurt her back in some way. Everything I had built with her felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse. I thought about the life we'd built together, the memories, the dreams we shared, all tainted. By this revelation, I felt hollow. But as I looked at her sitting there, her eyes darting down, filled with guilt and shame, something shifted inside me. I had a choice to make. Would I fight for our marriage? Could I even look at her the same way again? I needed time to think, to process. In that moment, I realized I couldn't just accept her excuses and continue living in denial. I knew something had to change. I had to take back my power. And as heart-wrenching as it was, I made a silent vow to myself. If she thought she could just disregard me like that, she had another thing coming. To be continued. After Sarah's confession, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to leap into the unknown. I knew I needed to take a step back and think about what I wanted. It was clear that I couldn't just sweep this under the rug and go back to the way things were. I took a few days to process everything, keeping to myself. Sarah was desperate to talk, to explain, but I needed space. I didn't want to hear any more of her excuses or justifications. It felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies, and I had to find a way to swim back to shore. During that time, I was consumed by a mix of anger and heartbreak. I found myself replaying every moment we had shared over the past few months, scrutinizing them for any signs of her betrayal. I thought about the times when we had laughed together or made plans, and it felt like salt being rubbed into a wound. How could she do this? How could someone I loved so deeply betray me over someone like Emily? It didn't make any sense. At work, I struggled to focus. My colleagues noticed my distraction and I brushed off their concern with a smile, masking the storm brewing inside me. But in the quiet moments, the reality of my situation would hit me like a freight train. I was a laughingstock. The thought gnawed at me. The worst part was that I felt powerless. I wanted to confront both of them, to expose their betrayal, but what would that achieve? I had to figure out a plan of action, something that would give me a sense of control. That's when the idea hit me. It was a blend of petty revenge and poetic justice. If Sarah was going to betray me with my childhood crush, then I would show her what she was missing. I would remind her of the man she was throwing away. I had the perfect person in mind, someone who not only knew me but also saw me for who I truly was, flaws and all. Her name was Jenna, an old friend from high school who had recently moved back to town. We had always had a spark, but life took us in different directions. I had heard she was single and I thought, why not? I reached out to Jenna under the guise of wanting to catch up. We met for coffee and it felt effortless. As we chatted, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. She was everything Sarah wasn't: genuine, kind, and most importantly, interested in me. We spent hours talking and I began to feel a flicker of hope. I realized how long it had been since someone had looked at me with respect and admiration, and it felt good. As I started hanging out with Jenna more, I made sure Sarah saw us together. I posted pictures on social media, casually mentioning our meetups to mutual friends. I could sense Sarah's annoyance whenever she learned about my outings. She tried to reach out, texting me apologies, begging for a second chance. But I didn't want to hear it. Watching her squirm was oddly satisfying. It was my turn to feel desired and appreciated, and I was going to savor every moment. Jenna and I went on a few casual dates, and each time I felt more alive. I'd laugh, flirt, and share stories, feeling a connection I hadn't realized I missed. I started to notice how beautiful she was, both inside and out. It was refreshing to be around someone who didn't have hidden agendas or toxic behaviors. She was supportive and genuinely interested in my life. It was a stark contrast to the tension I had grown accustomed to with Sarah. But I knew I had to be careful. I wasn't trying to drag Jenna into a messy love triangle. I made it clear that I was still processing my feelings about Sarah. Jenna respected that and appreciated my honesty, which only deepened our bond. As the days turned into weeks, the more I enjoyed my time with Jenna, the more I realized how much Sarah had taken for granted. In the back of my mind, I still had that nagging feeling of guilt. After all, Sarah was my wife, and I had committed to her in front of our friends and family. But the deeper I delved into this new relationship, the more convinced I became that I deserved more than what Sarah had offered me. It was during a dinner date with Jenna, as we laughed over our food, that I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I could see my future more clearly than I had in a long time. I had been a good husband, but I was no longer willing to accept mediocrity in love. I realized I had the power to choose happiness, and I was determined to take it. But I knew the confrontation with Sarah would have to come eventually. I was prepared for it. This was about more than just revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and moving forward. I no longer wanted to live in the shadow of betrayal. I wanted to step into the light and embrace what could be, to be continued. Eventually, the time came for me to confront Sarah. I had been putting it off, waiting for the right moment, but deep down, I knew I could no longer avoid it. I wanted her to see that I was no longer the meek and forgiving husband she had taken for granted. I wanted her to realize the gravity of her actions and how they had irrevocably changed our relationship. I picked a quiet evening when I knew we would have some privacy. Sarah had been trying to talk to me more, and her guilt was palpable. I could feel her anxiety crackling in the air as I called her into the living room. She looked tense, her hands twisting nervously in her lap as she took a seat across from me. I could see that she had been crying, her eyes puffy and red. "Sarah, we need to talk," I began, choosing my words carefully. I wanted to be calm, but my heart raced with a mix of fury and sadness. "I know about you and Emily." Her response was immediate, her eyes widening. "Oh my God, you saw us, didn't you?" She took a deep breath, her voice shaky. "I can explain, it wasn't what you think. No, Sarah, I saw you. I saw how close you were, how much you enjoyed being with her. I interrupted, my voice firm. Don't try to downplay it. You had an emotional affair with her and it was clear you were enjoying it. She opened her mouth to protest, but I continued, refusing to let her interrupt. While you were doing that, I was out moving on with my life. I've been seeing someone else, someone who actually appreciates me. Her name is Jenna. At the mention of Jenna, I watched as Sarah's expression twisted in disbelief. I could see the realization crash over her. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. I knew she must have felt the ground beneath her shifting, the reality of her actions coming back to haunt her. I don't want to hear your excuses, I said, my voice steady. You made your choice when you decided to betray me. You thought I wouldn't find out and that you could continue living this double life. But guess what? I'm not that stupid. I'm not going to sit here and let you play the victim now. You've hurt me too deeply. Sarah's eyes filled with tears and she began to plead. Please just listen. I was feeling lost. I thought I was falling out of love with you. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Her voice broke and I could sense the desperation seeping into her words. Didn't mean for it to go this far. I echoed incredulously. What were you thinking? You don't just accidentally fall into someone else's arms. You made conscious choices every step of the way. You're not the victim here. Suddenly, she straightened up, her expression morphing from sadness to indignation. You think you can just replace me just like that? You think I wouldn't find out? You're being petty and you're not even giving me a chance to explain. Petty? I scoffed. You cheated on me. You destroyed the trust we built together. I'm not here to play games. I deserve better. If you had been honest with me about your feelings, we could have worked through this, but you chose to betray me instead. Her bravado evaporated and she looked small, vulnerable. I know I messed up, I was scared and I didn't know how to talk to you about it, but I've always loved you. Can't we fix this? My heart ached at her words, but I couldn't let that sway me. You love me, because it didn't seem like it when you were out with Emily. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't lie. I can't just forget about everything. I thought we were building a life together, but you shattered that. At that moment, I felt a mix of liberation and sorrow. I had confronted her, exposed her deceit, and taken a stand for myself. I realized that I was no longer just a victim of her betrayal. I was reclaiming my own narrative. As the confrontation wore on, I saw her emotions shift. She moved from anger to sadness to desperation in a matter of minutes. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was my moment of clarity. It was no longer about revenge or hurting her back. It was about standing tall and owning my truth. I need to think about what comes next, I told her, my voice steady. I can't see you the same way anymore. I need time to figure out what this means for us. You can keep trying to reach out and apologize, but right now I need space. With that, I stood up, leaving her sitting there, tears streaming down her face. I knew I would have to navigate the aftermath of this confrontation, but I was no longer afraid. I was determined to focus on my own happiness and what I wanted out of life. As I walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was stepping into a new chapter, one that didn't include Sarah's betrayal, and I was ready to take the first steps toward a future that I could finally feel excited about. To be continued. After that confrontation, the weeks that followed felt surreal. I had opened a floodgate of emotions, and now it was time to deal with the fallout. Sarah was persistent, sending me countless texts and trying to engage in conversations whenever she could. Her pleas ranged from heartfelt apologies to outright anger, but I held my ground. I wasn't ready to let her back into my life so easily, especially after she had so carelessly shattered my trust. In the meantime, I continued dating Jenna. Each time we met, it felt more like a breath of fresh air. She was supportive and understanding, never pushing me to label what we had or rush into anything. We would go for long walks, share our dreams, and laugh about silly things. It reminded me of the joy I used to feel before everything went downhill with Sarah. Jenna was a constant reminder of what I had been missing in my life. One night, Jenna and I ended up at a local bar, a place where we could relax and enjoy each other's company without any prying eyes. Over drinks, I opened up about everything that had happened with Sarah, and Jenna listened intently, her expression sympathetic but firm. You deserve better than what you had, she said gently, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. It's going to take time, but you're on the right path. As I looked into her eyes, I realized how much I appreciated her presence. I felt a sense of safety and warmth that I hadn't felt in a long time. It was a stark contrast to the chaos that Sarah had created. I could see a future in Jenna's smile, and for the first time in months, the fog of despair began to lift. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her attempts to fix our marriage. She would show up at my office, trying to catch me off guard, but I had grown adept at dodging her advances. I would often make excuses to avoid her, like having meetings or obligations that kept me busy. I couldn't bear the thought of facing her again, especially with all the new feelings I was starting to develop with Jenna. One evening, while I was out with Jenna, I received a message from Sarah that caught me off guard. It was an invite to a dinner she was hosting for some mutual friends. "I want to show everyone that things are okay between us," she wrote, as if inviting me to a play instead of a slice of our broken life. I thought about it for a moment. Did I want to go back to that reality where I would be seen with my estranged wife pretending that everything was normal? Deciding to attend felt like a betrayal to my own healing. I turned to Jenna, who was scrolling through her phone. "Sarah invited me to a dinner with our friends. I'm tempted to go, but I feel like it'll just be more pain," I said, my voice betraying my uncertainty. Jenna looked thoughtful. "You have to do what feels right for you," she replied. "But remember, you're not obligated to put on a show for anyone. You're moving on. If you feel like this is a step backward, then it probably is." The clarity in her words resonated with me. I realized that attending that dinner would only serve Sarah's narrative, allowing her to play the victim while I was still wrestling with the consequences of her actions. I needed to keep moving forward. I texted Sarah back, politely declining the invitation and reiterating that I needed space to figure things out. The days turned into weeks, and I felt like I was finally gaining some momentum in my life. I focused on my work, poured energy into my hobbies, and spent time with Jenna. Each interaction with her reinforced the idea that I could be happy again. I was beginning to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage, who I wanted to be. However, Sarah didn't take my rejection lightly. One night, as I was out with Jenna, my phone buzzed incessantly. I glanced down to see multiple messages from Sarah, escalating from angry accusations to desperate pleas. "You'll regret this," one of them read. "You're going to miss me. You'll always choose me." It felt like she was trying to manipulate my emotions, and I refused to let that happen. Instead, I turned to Jenna, who noticed my frustration. "She's still trying to reach you?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "Yeah, and it's getting old. I can't believe she thinks I'll just come back after everything," I replied, shaking my head. "I'm done with the games." Jenna took a deep breath, reaching for my hand again. "You're doing the right thing. Keep your boundaries firm. You deserve so much more than this drama." Her support was all I needed. I didn't want to let Sarah's chaos invade my newfound peace. I began to realize that it was time to set the final boundaries in my relationship with Sarah. I needed to cut ties completely. I decided to meet with her one last time. I wanted to lay everything on the table and make it clear where I stood. I arranged to meet her at a coffee shop, a neutral ground where the confrontation could be calm but firm. As I sat at the table waiting for her to arrive, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. When she walked in, her eyes immediately found mine. She approached the table, her expression shifting from hopeful to guarded. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice tentative. "Let's get straight to it, Sarah," I said, my tone steady. "I'm not coming back. I'm not interested in fixing things. I need to prioritize my happiness, and right now that means moving on." Her expression hardened. "You think you know what you want. You're just running away because you can't handle the truth." "Maybe I am, but I'm also finally standing up for myself. I deserve someone who won't betray me," I shot back. "And that's not you. I need to move on, and that includes cutting off all ties." As we talked, she tried to sway me with memories and apologies, but I stood firm. I realized that this was my moment to reclaim my life, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. The conversation was painful, but I could feel the weight on my shoulders lift as I articulated my feelings. I was finally taking control. After that meeting, I left the coffee shop feeling lighter, as if a door had closed on a chapter of my life that had weighed me down for far too long. I was ready to embrace my future, to see where this new path with Jenna would lead, and to fully let go of what Sarah had turned into. To be continued. After the final confrontation with Sarah, I felt an overwhelming surge of relief. The weight of her betrayal had been heavy on my shoulders, and as I walked away from that coffee shop, it felt like I had finally shed a layer of skin, one that was filled with doubt, anger, and sadness. I realized that I was on a new path, and it was one that didn't include Sarah. Jenna and I spent more time together, and each encounter deepened the connection we were building. I found joy in the little things, quiet dinners, spontaneous hikes, and late-night talks about our dreams and aspirations. It felt refreshing to share laughter and love without the baggage that had plagued my relationship with Sarah. Jenna had become a beacon of light in what had once been a very dark time for me. One particular Saturday, Jenna suggested we go for a weekend getaway to a cabin in the woods. The idea felt perfect, a chance to escape the chaos and simply enjoy each other's company without the distractions of everyday life. I eagerly agreed, excited about the prospect of a fresh experience. We packed our bags and set off, the anticipation bubbling within me as we drove. When we arrived at the cabin, nestled among the towering trees and surrounded by nature, I felt a wave of tranquility wash over me. The air was crisp and clean, a stark contrast to the heaviness I had felt in my heart for so long. We spent the first afternoon hiking, laughing as we stumbled over roots and joked about our lack of coordination. It felt freeing to be out in the fresh air, away from the memories that had haunted me. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, we sat on the porch with glasses of wine, watching the stars begin to twinkle. "I'm really glad we're here," Jenna said, her voice soft and genuine. "It feels like a new beginning for both of us." I turned to her, feeling a surge of gratitude. "It really does. I never thought I could feel this way again. You've brought so much joy back into my life." It was true. She had reignited a spark in me that I thought had been extinguished forever. As the night deepened, we shared stories about our childhoods, our dreams, and what we wanted moving forward. I found myself opening up more than I ever thought I could. I shared my journey with Sarah, how it had felt like I was drowning, but how Jenna had pulled me back to the surface. I could see in her eyes that she understood the depth of my struggle, and it only brought us closer together. "Can I ask you something?" Jenna said after a moment of silence, her voice a bit hesitant. "Do you think there's a chance you could forgive Sarah one day?" I paused, contemplating her question. "I think forgiveness might be possible in the future, but it will take time. Right now, I'm focused on moving forward, not looking back. I can't let that negativity back into my life. I've taken my power back, and I want to keep it that way." Jenna nodded, and I could see the respect in her eyes. "That's a healthy way to look at it. You deserve to be happy, and I'm honored to be part of that journey with you." We spent the rest of the night in comfortable silence, wrapped in blankets and sharing warmth under the stars. I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long, and for the first time in months, I could truly say that I was happy. But as the days turned into weeks, I knew I had to face the final chapter with Sarah. I had told her I needed space, and I had taken it, but I also knew that she was still lurking in the background, trying to manipulate circumstances to her advantage. It was time to officially close that door. I chose a Tuesday afternoon to meet her at a local diner, a place that was neutral territory but familiar enough. As I sat at the booth, waiting for her to arrive, I mentally prepared myself for the conversation. I wanted it to be clear and definitive. No more mixed messages. When Sarah walked in, her demeanor was different than when we last met. There was a flicker of desperation in her eyes, and I could tell she had been crying. She slid into the booth across from me, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice shaky. "I know things have been rough, but I wanted to talk about our future." I cut her off gently but firmly. "Sarah, I appreciate you wanting to talk, but I need to be honest with you. I've moved on. I'm not interested in revisiting our relationship or trying to fix things. I'm happy now and I don't want to go back to the pain you caused." Her expression shifted from shock to anger. "You think you found happiness. You think this new girl is going to be any better than me. You're just running away from the reality of what we had." I took a deep breath, refusing to let her provoke me. "What we had was built on lies and betrayal, Sarah. I can't go back to that. I've spent too long trying to make excuses for you, but I've realized I deserve better. I deserve someone who values me, who respects me, and who won't cheat on me." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy. I had given her more than enough chances to come clean and be honest with me, and she had squandered them. "I wish things could be different," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Me too," I replied, my tone softening only slightly. "But they can't be. I need to close this chapter for good. I hope you can find happiness, but it won't be with me." As I looked at her, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was sad for what we had lost, but more than that, I felt empowered. I was reclaiming my life, my happiness, and my future. I stood up, paid the bill, and walked out, leaving her behind in the diner. That evening, I met Jenna for dinner, feeling lighter than I had in months. I recounted my conversation with Sarah, and Jenna listened intently, her eyes filled with understanding and support. "You did the right thing," she said with a smile. "You're moving forward, and that's what matters." As we laughed and enjoyed our meal, I realized that this was my new beginning. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, and I had no intention of looking back. To be continued. The weeks following my final meeting with Sarah were transformative. I felt like I had stepped into a new life, one that was devoid of the toxicity and betrayal that had plagued my marriage. I spent more time with Jenna, and our connection deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. Each moment we shared reinforced my belief that I deserved happiness, and it felt good to know that I was finally on the right path. Jenna was a breath of fresh air. She was supportive, kind-hearted, and genuinely interested in building a future. We explored new places together, took spontaneous road trips, and even tried our hands at cooking, often resulting in more laughter than culinary success. Each day I spent with her felt like a reminder of what love should be, full of respect, trust, and adventure. One evening, as we sat on my couch binge-watching a series, Jenna turned to me and said, "You know, I'm really proud of you. You've come so far since all of this started." Her voice was soft, but I could hear the sincerity behind it. "Thanks," I replied, feeling a swell of gratitude. "It's been a journey, but I think I finally understand what I want in life, and I want this with you." Her eyes sparkled, and in that moment I realized just how much I had grown. I had gone from a heartbroken husband to a man who was ready to embrace love again. But there was still a lingering thought in the back of my mind. How would Sarah respond to my new relationship? One day, I received an unexpected message from Sarah. It was a simple text asking if we could talk. I hesitated at first, unsure if I wanted to reopen that chapter. However, part of me felt it was necessary to finally put everything to rest. So I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop, a familiar location where we had shared countless conversations. When I arrived, Sarah was already sitting at a table. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could see the uncertainty written all over her face. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "Let's get straight to it," I replied, feeling a mixture of apprehension and determination. "What did you want to talk about?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since we last spoke. I know I hurt you deeply and I can't change the past, but I've realized that I need to take responsibility for my actions. I'm sorry for everything, truly." I was taken aback by her sincerity. "I appreciate you saying that, but it doesn't change what happened. I can't just forget the betrayal." "I understand," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "But I hope that we could find some sort of closure. I don't want to be the person who hurt you anymore. I want to be better for myself." I regarded her carefully. "You can't expect me to forgive you and forget everything just like that. It'll take time." "I know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I want to be honest with you. I've been seeing a therapist. I'm working on myself and trying to understand why I made those choices. She paused, looking down at her hands. "I want you to be happy, even if it's not with me." Her admission caught me off guard. It was a step I hadn't expected, and part of me felt a flicker of sympathy. I'm glad to hear you're trying to improve yourself, but please understand it doesn't mean I want to go back to our marriage. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I get that. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on being a better person. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging in the air. I felt a mixture of sadness and liberation. I was ready to forgive, not for her sake but for my own. Peace of mind. I hope you find what you're looking for, Sarah. I really do. After our conversation, I left that coffee shop feeling lighter. I had finally released the anger and resentment that had been holding me captive. I didn't need to carry her betrayal with me anymore. I was moving forward and it felt good. As the months passed, Jenna and I continued to build our relationship. We explored new places together, shared dreams about the future, and found joy in the simple things. I introduced her to my friends who welcomed her with open arms. I could see the difference in my life. I was no longer defined by my past mistakes or the darkness of my former relationship. One evening, as we walked hand in hand along the beach, I turned to Jenna and said, "You know, I never thought I could find someone who truly understands me after everything that happened. Thank you for being patient with me." She smiled warmly. "You deserve happiness. I'm just glad I can be part of this new chapter in your life." As the waves crashed against the shore and the sun set behind us, I realized that I had finally closed the door on my past. I had come out stronger, more resilient, and ready to embrace a future filled with possibilities. The journey hadn't been easy, but I had learned valuable lessons about love, trust, and most importantly, my own worth. And as I stood there watching the horizon, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the strength to face it head on.